Imagine there is no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. So the kingdom of heaven is a state of consciousness in which the soul and the body and the mind are in harmony. And you hear this often as that mind-body-spirit connection. And Jesus, the great master teacher, spoke about this in his many parables. He never described it as a place located in some far-off distant realm, but rather as a condition of the mind that can be attained by man. And in the parable that I shared with you this morning, the mustard seed shows the capacity of the small thought of truth developing in consciousness until it becomes the abiding place of a higher type of thinking, which is what the birds in the air represent. And the bird that crossed my path this week was the roadrunner. And the roadrunner teaches mental agility and speed. Their tail acts kind of like an air brake, facilitating stops and turns and even allowing them to go in a completely different direction if necessary. It also implies an activation in the kundalini. And Joseph Campbell describes the kundalini as rising from the lowest chakra at the base of the spine to the crown of the head where the lotus flower opens. And this is the work that we do with the crystal bowls. I cordially invite you to participate in any of our events. Joseph Campbell goes on further to say that the psychology and the personality of the practitioner who experiences Kundalini will be altogether and fundamentally transformed. Or, as the children from the Chinook Spirit Academy, I worked with them this week during Spirit Time. Susan was here and also Anne. And they defined it as, it tickles. So you have a beautiful feeling of sensation all around you. And they were so small that not only were their feet in the bowls, they could actually stand in them. And then I played the bowls around them. So we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. So the Roadrunner enables us to manifest our thoughts more easily, shows us connections and ideas that we might not have thought possible, especially when we get tickled or transformed. And this past week, I experienced something incredibly sacred, a connection that one might not think could be possible. As we traveled over the ridge of the mountain and the valley came into view below us, I felt the energy moving through my body, and a feeling of peace began to come over me as we approached one of the most sacred pilgrimage sites in North America. And legend has it that in 1810, on Good Friday, the Brotherhood found a crucifix buried in this location. And they dug it up and carried it to the closest church where the priest accepted it. And then, mysteriously, the next morning, the cross was gone, only to be discovered back at the original site. So the priest ordered it to be brought back 2 different times, and it kept going back mysteriously to the same spot. And that spot, in case you haven't figured it out yet, is called Chamayo. And as I entered the original ermita, where the crucifix was buried, and where the opening in the ground that the holy dirt sits in is located, I also learned that that is where the Native Americans went to for healing. So I rubbed the dirt between my hands, because I wanted to see if it was going to work or not, of course, because I'm curious. And my hands started to get warm. And as I came out of the ermita, there were crutches lined up, one after the other, from people who had done the same thing and walked away without their crutches. So I was curious about that, and I did a little bit of reading, and it turns out that the priests sometimes actually fill the hole up with more dirt that's not from the dirt that's located there. And yet, people still are healed. And the scientists have done tests on the dirt, and they've discovered that it does a little bit of something for arthritis. But other than that, scientifically, it's not proven to do much of anything. And yet, people walk away from there affected by the energy. So how does that happen? Remember, the great master teacher said, "It is done unto you as you believe." And this is what I love about the science of mind teaching, the power of the mind. So as we came out of the Santuario de los Niños, there were children's shoes everywhere, on the walls, on the ceiling, lined up. And so, being the curious one that I am, I asked about that as well. And I was told that they were there so that when the Holy Child wakes up in the middle of the night and he goes to tend his flock, he always has something to wear on his feet. So as I begin to entertain the idea of walking up the steps to the Stairway to Heaven, which is the title of my talk this morning, what I realized is that that Holy Child exists within each of us. It is the one who helps us learn how to shift our thought processes. It is the one who opens the gateway towards the new earth. So heaven is a state of consciousness that tickles and transforms. Whenever we are able to embody an atmosphere of conviction that awakens the original thoughts that come from the divine that are within us. So heaven is not a place paved with streets of gold and gates of pearl. It's a state of consciousness. It's unformed, unlimited, and unconditioned. It is the real state of our consciousness. And no one can go to heaven unless they come from heaven. So the journey is always within, to a greater awareness of who we are as spiritual beings. And Ralph Waldo Emerson says that what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. The world is all right when we view it correctly. And our theme this month is gratitude, and we have so much to be grateful for. The cornucopia, which of course you're seeing a lot of now because it is Thanksgiving, in classical antiquity was a symbol of abundance and nourishment. Usually had produce or nuts or fruit or something like that inside of it. In our modern depictions, it's usually wicker and hollow, and sometimes filled with fruit and vegetables, and also decorations like fall flowers. And mythology offers multiple explanations of the origin of the cornucopia. The best known, of course, being the nurturing of the infant Zeus, who was cared for by many divine attendants, including the goat, Almathea, who fed him from her breast. And at a young age, Zeus had unusual abilities and strength. He was already testing that mind-body-spirit connection, like we all do. And he started moving things around in the land of effect, or that world that exists out there, the material world, instead of creating from within, from the divine. In our country, the cornucopia, of course, is tied into Thanksgiving, the bounty of the harvest, and of course the turkey. And the turkey symbolizes shared blessings and harvest. So the question becomes, are we using our blessings to their greatest advantage? Stretching our spiritual muscle isn't always easy. If we consciously turn away from our truth, we no longer have access to the cornucopia of life. Have no fear, of course, the law will continue to work. It'll just work by appearing not to work. So whether you are lured by the hope of some miraculous discovery or enticed by the promise of some mystical fulfillment, what's important to understand is that what we are looking for is what we are looking with. Dr. Holmes, who is the founder of the Science of Mind teaching, which is what we practice, says that we cannot contract the infinite, but we can expand the finite. And in the early days when I was bonding with my crystal bowls, I asked for some feathers, and I got a whole turkey. So you can expand the ideas. There were lots of turkeys around my house, but none of them had ever dropped any feathers. And so off I went to yoga class, and I was on my way to the market, and there was literally a turkey, a whole turkey, in the middle of the road in front of my car, and I stopped and put the flashers on and got out and prayed over him and asked for permission to remove his tail feathers. And I didn't have a shovel, so I just gently moved him off the road, and he rolled down into what they call the holler in North Carolina, which is simply actually the same thing here that they call the arroyo, the same thing. So heaven and earth, states of consciousness, states of mind, the ideal and its manifestation. The ideal is the realm of the original thought. The manifestation is the result of our thought force upon that original thought. And as spiritual beings having a human experience, we are always in the midst of this creative process. The creative process has been going on for eons and eons. But when we come together to consciously study or pray or meditate or even practice ceremony, sacred ceremony, like lighting the mother candle and the father candle, our united collective intent invites in a greater experience of the light. So it's up to us to let go of the ideas of judgment, separation, limitation, and to begin to demonstrate support for higher choices. Building the rainbow bridge towards that new earth requires embodiment of light at a deeper level, a deeper soul connection. And as we evolve into a greater experience of the I am consciousness, and we acknowledge that higher solar cosmic Christ itself that is within us, our lives will begin to overflow. There will be lots of things coming out of that cornucopia. And the wisdom has presented itself in so many different ways. Whether you find inspiration at Chimayo, how many of you have visited Chimayo? What an incredible place. Or you hear that still small voice guiding you from within. Or you interpret messages from the animals. You all know I love to do that. They're all leading to the same conclusion. The creator state of consciousness is returning. There are brand new realms of multidimensional consciousness available for us. And the way that we get in tune with that is through spiritual practice and focused intent. Whatever higher dimension you decide to embody, it's going to be different from the way things always were. My ascension coach, Sandra Walter, always says, let us show humanity what is possible with ascension. And in the Science of Mind teaching, we have a declaration of principles that was created by Dr. Ernest Holmes. And I'd like to share one of those with you this morning. It says, we believe that the kingdom of heaven is within us, and that we experience the kingdom to the degree that we become conscious of it. So in order for it to turn towards us, we have to turn towards it. And as your spiritual leader, I mentioned earlier, 1-year anniversary, very exciting. It is my intention to continue to expand a greater conscious awareness of that presence, of that power, of that love, and of that light. And I stand in this moment in complete commitment to that, to each and every one of you, to really make 2019 soar, to really become that beacon of light that I know we can be as a community. And so I ask you to imagine all the people sharing all the world. I ask you to join me in consciousness as we climb the stairway to heaven together. Thank you, and namaste.